Welcome to the discussion. My guest today is Jeff Fossum, the Senior Vice President for Booz Allen Hamilton. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
In many ways, this is part two of a conversation about IT modernization that Booz Allen Hamilton and I guess, are having. The first one was during a panel about a month ago, and then we've featured IT executives from the Patent and Trademark Office, from the General Services Administration, from the Department of Health and Human Services. We discussed this IT modernization journey, and what we came from that is, and this is no surprise to you, I'm sure, Jeff, is that it's much about changing culture as it is about changing the technology. And as we've heard for what feels like decades now, the technology always seems to be the easy part. We heard from PTO, for example, they're very much ahead of most agencies in adopting Agile, the DevOps methodology to modernize mission-critical technology systems. We heard about HHS. It's just starting to dip their toe in this Agile world and get on the journey of IT modernization. And from GSA, they brought the contracting perspective, and they're seeing a lot of interest in the assortment of approaches for IT modernization. A lot of it is looking at this iterative, Agile, DevOps, whatever synonym you want to use type approach. In our discussion today with Jeff Fossum from Booz Allen Hamilton, we're going to focus on the best ways for agencies to take advantage of their opportunity to improve and make their mission areas more effective through this power of digital transformation. There's a lot of questions out there. We're going to try to answer some of them, including what changes in culture, strategy, and leadership and innovation are needed to harness the emerging and disruptive technologies. How can leaders drive humans and machines to enhance mission delivery and or get a competitive advantage? And as agencies increasingly use the power of digital to deliver services to clients and citizens, what challenges do they face with IT modernization and this digital transformation? We're going to turn to Jeff Fossum, the Senior Vice President, Booz Allen Hamilton, to help answer many of those questions. So, Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot. Let's just start at the beginning. Tons of challenges out there. What stands out to you as some of the biggest?
Well, I think some of the biggest challenges, as you mentioned, are cultural and really focusing in on it. It's necessary to have a holistic approach to IT modernization. Too oftentimes, it's viewed as simply a technology problem, and we forget about the softer side of a successful modernization around change management, engagement with your stakeholders and your users, frequent communications, et cetera. And, so at Booz Allen, we take a much more consultative approach, one that's holistic and sort of take a mantra that we need business or mission-driven IT as opposed to the opposite direction where IT is driving the business or the mission.
I think the holistic piece is interesting because so many times, you're right, people think of, oh, well, I have this holistically. I have the hardware and I have the software.
Right.
And I have the services. But really, when you talk holistic, go through each of maybe what are each of those parts of that holistic approach?
Well, I think we have to make sure we're including and engaging with all of the stakeholders and those that will be using ultimately the technology solutions we're providing. And I think too frequently we make assumptions about what they will need. This meets the business requirements, but does it actually meet the needs of the users of the systems to get their job done, to meet the mission goals that they have? And so it's more around change management, bringing folks along as you modernize, because it is a change, and a lot of folks fail to recognize that you can have a successful system from a functional perspective, but it completely misses the mark, and you get no adoption of said system. You get no adaptation, because sometimes we're changing how work needs to be done. And without really communicating that, you can have a failed system and create some shelfware.
And that's, to me, so interesting to have this idea that you can create the system that works. It works great. But if the users don't come to it, then what are you getting really? What have you accomplished? Do you see that still happening? And you think it's so easy?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about what you see.
Well, I mean, I often refer to it as sort of the field of dreams syndrome, where we oftentimes see a client that will, has this mindset that will build it and they will come and they will use it. I saw a particular example in one of our major departments where they started out on this journey, picked a technology solution, really did not engage fully with the users, changed their business processes, and put it out there in production and claimed victory. And they had absolutely no adoption. The system absolutely failed, was taken out of production, and the users went back to their legacy system and got their job done, but missed a great opportunity to improve things.
Did they go back and then fix that? Did they understand what the mistakes they made, or did they blame something else? Because I think too often, oh, the technology just wasn't ready. That's the easy
Right.
blame, right?
I think in this particular case, they are starting again, but they're taking that more holistic view. They recognize that there was mistakes made, lessons learned, and they're actually following that and actually making good progress, but now in a more incremental approach that is really gaining user buy-in. And that's what's critical in this. Get a sense of shared ownership in the modernization success.
I see this so many times when I talk to federal chief information officers, other IT executives. They're all moving toward that customer-centric view. They either are creating a office of customer service or multiple offices meeting each of the mission areas. Is that part of this journey towards getting the transformation correct? Is first understanding, okay, who really is my customer and what their
Yep.
needs are?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical. And you see it in different flavors, but it is a necessary component in the fast-paced change of technology. The user community of today is very different than it was 20 years ago. It's mobile. It's impatient. It is looking for responsive, very visual kinds of designs. So you really have to get out and engage your users and see how they do their work or engage with your current system if you're going to have any hope of building a improved, modernized system that meets their expectations.
And it's interesting because so many times the government gets a bad rap for not meeting users' expectations, but in fact, the user base is much different. I mean, if you look at, people love to point out Netflix or Amazon, and their user base, while big, is still not as big as sometimes the federal government's user base.
True.
So how do you ensure that you're meeting the right needs of the right users at the right time? What are some of the things you're seeing that the government's doing the right?
Well, I think it is getting out and engaging with sets of users. When you're talking about the entire citizenry of the United States, I can't go talk to all 330 million folks.
Now that would be impressive. If
That
you
would
could.
be. But you can get sense through good sampling, talking to sets of individuals. And look, we're never going to get it perfect first go, even when we do all the right kinds of things around change management and user-centric design, et cetera. And so I think it's really important that we also plan for the long term. Once we go to production, you have to make sure you know implicitly how folks are using the system and be responsive to the changes that they're demanding. So you keep the adoption rate high.
And I know we'll get into that agile approach in probably the next segment. I want to continue down this path of the users and the change management piece. The communication is probably, you can say it multiple times. What do you need to do? You need to communicate, then you need to communicate, and then communicate one more time just
Exactly.
in case, because people hear things differently. What are you seeing from the federal government in terms of bringing in the right people and communicating with the stakeholders? Are they doing focus groups, or is it happening online, or is it the power users, as we call them, the P1s in the radio world? Talk
Yep.
a little bit about what you're seeing.
Well, I think the approaches that work best are those that take multiple channels to that problem. So yes, you want to talk to your power users, but you also want to have focus groups in different segments of what you're trying to design for. You need to communicate often, and it needs to be in different ways. Sometimes it should be demonstrations of the progress you've been making. Other times it may be through surveys, or it may be stop by and see how you're doing your work today. So I think multi-channeled approaches, but you can't do it enough. You really can't.
And I think that's got to be something that the federal government has got to accept, and that they also have got to start to really take advantage of the easier way to connect with their users. 30, 40, 50 years ago, there was one way. It was phone, or
Yep.
two ways, phone or in person.
Yep.
Now, because of mobile, because of online, it's much easier. Do you see that the federal agencies are recognizing that the path has widened?
I think so, but I mean, there's some legitimate challenges still. I mean, with various privacy acts, et cetera, you can't just bombard your users with surveys after surveys. So, some inventive ways, leveraging social media, getting folks to volunteer information, is really making a difference. It's giving you, again, multiple channels and different ways to engage your users. And frankly, we need to do that because that's how they operate.
The other piece of this, and I think, or the other side of the coin, I guess, is the government employee themselves. They have to come with a different mindset. When we talked earlier about the holistic approach, the piece of that has to be that the federal employee has to look at how they serve their customer differently. Is that the hardest way to turn this big battleship of the government to get people to get out of their comfort zones in some ways?
Well, I actually see a lot of positive movement on that front. I think there's more to be done, and some agencies are further along that change vector than others. It is, though, for some folks, a big mindset change, whether you're talking about agile or designing for operations as opposed to just designing your initial requirements, getting out and really understanding how your users need their problem solved. And there's also a good bit of governance, compliance, things you do as a fiduciary for taxpayer money. And so there are times where it feels like there's roadblocks to allowing the change to happen, but there's been a lot of progress on it, and I think we're on the right track.
It's interesting you bring up all these roadblocks. I know over the last 5-7 years, the General Services Administration, under the Obama administration, they really looked at trying to remove some of those roadblocks. You've seen stuff like challenge.gov. You've seen a bigger push for contests. And do you get a sense that that's helped, or that is part of this culture change that's happening by showing, hey, here's a small example of something that can be done, and look, this creates a pretty good success?
Absolutely. I think, testing out different approaches, I find working across a lot of different government client sets, they pay attention to what their colleagues are doing in other parts of government. Everybody is open to new ideas, new changes, but a lot of them really would like to see it having been proved in another agency before they jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah, that goes back to that whole risk adverseness of the government. And I think that's probably part of the reason why not just the move to Agile or DevOps, but also this mindset of user experience, user design has taken so long. And listen, there's a lot of people who will have negative feelings towards the U.S. Digital Service or AT&F, but they were helped change this culture, which then lets people like Booz Allen Hamilton and others kind of further along. Was there a turning point? Was there a time when all of a sudden agencies started talking about the user, the stakeholders that you can put your finger on and say, oh, that happened 2014 or 2015 or one contract or something?
For me, not really. I mean, I see there's a lot of unevenness in it. There are some agencies, and it's part of who they are, lean forward and lean into change and are welcoming of it. Others, and sometimes it's the mission they actually are in that causes them to be a much more conservative bunch and take a go slow approach. And so for me, I didn't see a specific turning point, but what I am seeing is the whole of government is turning.
And so much of it goes back to the leadership. I mean, if you look at something like U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, they had a CIO who was definitely on the cutting edge.
Yep.
Or if you look at the Federal Communications Commission with David Bray, who recently has left as the CIO, he pushed them further and gave them kind of that top coverage. And I think that sometimes gets lost in this holistic approach.
It does.
Leadership.
It does. I mean, you need change agents, and you will see some emerge. There was a gentleman at GSA who really changed the way they do systems work. And we were along for that journey and really pushed that agency forward in serving their customers in a much more responsive way, and really created an experience that people actually enjoyed as opposed to what it had been before.
All right, Jeff, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk into what those methodologies are, Agile, DevOps, whatever we're going to call it. We're going to take a break. You're listening to the discussion, IT Modernization in Government, sponsored by Booz Allen Hamilton on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM.